Well, let's get started. I want to give you guys kind of the lay of the land as far as what we do on these, and then we'll jump into it from there, and we should have some fun tonight. Okay, so first thing to understand is that we're going to tackle this in a way where basically we're going to talk like high level on stuff at first, so we can get kind of the general idea on things and a good understanding of what it is that is applicable for everybody in this context. And then from there, we're going to start to move it down into ideas, concepts, things like that. And then from there, we're going to actually talk about how it applies with like some action steps that you guys could start to do and take away from this. That usually takes anywhere from like 15 to 30 minutes. And then what I do after that is I just open it up to a Q&A. And so we'll talk about how to structure all of that and everything. But one of the things that I found as I've done dozens of these over the years is that I got to give you guys that high level kind of general principle based stuff so that our questions are really good and applicable when we get into it. And then where I can really help you out and get the meat of all of this done is once we jump into the Q&A itself. Okay. So if that sounds like a good plan, type a 1 in the chat for me, just so I know that we're all on the same page on that. And then we can get going. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay. So the question that I always ask about everything, whether it's style stuff, it's parenting stuff, it's masculinity stuff, it doesn't matter what it is. One of the questions they always ask, and I mean, you guys did this when you were 4. If you have kids, especially young kids, you know that they still do this. But the big question is why? And so when we're talking today about dress codes, dressing for work, how to dress in a way that can improve your quality of life in a work environment, the big question is why? Why does it matter? How can it affect us? How can it impact us? And so that's the first thing that we need to start to address. So let's do that. I'm going to share my screen here with you guys so that we can take a look at this whole concept. And we're going to start listing some of these whys for us. Okay. So the first thing that most people think of, or that most people consider when they start to ask these whys, is the way that I dress can impact others. It can impact the way that other people see me. It can impact the way that they treat me. It can have a big impact in every regard. The next way, and this is honestly even more important, is the impact that the way that I dress can have on myself. So how it impacts myself. All right, so let's break these down. Let's talk about both of these so that we can kind of get some context here. When it comes to impacting others, there's a lot about this. The first thing is going to be like basically there's a whole level of communication. Okay. When I dress for work and I show up and I'm dressed appropriately, I look like I belong. I look like I know that I belong. I'm supposed to be there. A lot of times there's even this level of like status or authority. There's a reason why police officers dress the way that they do. It's to affect or to impact those of us who interact with them while they're on shift, while they're at work. Same thing with firemen, same thing with really anybody who's in an authority position. It's a communication thing. And as we break that down even further, we can look at things like status within a workplace. It used to be a long time ago that as your status increased within a work environment, so did the level of formality in the way that you dressed. And so, you know, the guys that were kind of younger and lower on the totem pole, lower on the food chain, would dress in a way that was a little bit more business casual. And the guys that were a little bit higher up would dress, or the CEOs or everybody else would dress in a way that was much more formal and signaled much more status in that way. Status is still there, but it's changed in a little bit of a different way. Same thing even when we talk about competence. You see this a lot more in things that are more quantifiable, more measurable when it comes to fields that work out that way. An easy one to think about this is within sports or any sort of like physical hobby where you dress according to the level of expertise that you have. And on a hobby level, you know, and again, we can apply this within the professional context, but if you are a hobby soccer player, I just started playing an indoor co-ed league with my wife and a bunch of our neighbors. I should not dress like I know how to play soccer. I don't know how to play soccer. And so if my clothing signals a level of competence that isn't there, it's a false signal. And so it creates this dissonance that actually creates problems for me on the field. Same thing happens within our industries. If you dress to signal a level of competence that you haven't actually attained, then you start to create problems that come with that. Okay. When we talk about the ways that it can impact ourselves, one of the first and primary ones, and especially with blue collar type work, is just the overall function, right? If I'm working on an oil rig, or if I'm running cattle, or I'm doing something else that is really kind of like a hard labor type thing, I'm not going to wear a suit, purely because from a functional standpoint, that's a stupid idea. I'm limiting my functionability, and I'm actually even putting myself in danger by wearing clothes that don't fit the job, that they don't get the job done properly. And so from a function perspective, that's huge. And then equally as big is a mindset perspective. And I would argue that this is probably the biggest thing that caring about your clothing does in any regard, from a professional context to a dating context to a family context to everything else. The main thing, the main power that clothing has is on our mindset in and of itself. The way that I see myself. Do I belong here? Am I somebody who's doing well? Am I excelling? Do I look like I'm signaling things like competence or status or anything else? Or do I feel like I'm an idiot in what I have on? Do I feel like I'm way overdressed, or I'm way underdressed? Am I wearing something that's completely ridiculous and it's constantly in the back of my head, and I'm paying too much attention to that as opposed to paying attention to the actual job that I'm supposed to be doing? So the way that we dress affects our mindset. And again, if you've ever had to earn the right to wear something, you understand this. There's actually a whole term that's rooted in this idea. It's called enclothed cognition. And basically, you take ideas like a doctor's lab coat, or you take a police officer's uniform, or you take even like a cap and gown that you wear at graduation when you graduate from high school or you graduate from college. And when you put those things on and you wear them in the right context, and you understand that you've earned the right to wear those things, there's a massive boost on your own internal mindset. It's a massive boost on your feeling as far as your sense of accomplishment, your sense of competence. It totally kills off, or at least drastically minimizes, anything like imposter syndrome. And so this mindset aspect of it is huge. Now, what's so fascinating is if you go back to the 20th century, we had this whole idea of a dress code, and dress codes did all of these things for us. They made it so that we could properly communicate how we were with other people. They made it so that we could understand different signals of status. They made it so we could signal things like competence or authority or those other variables. Dress codes were based on clothes that were functional, and they certainly were things that when you put it on, it would impact your mindset. And the beauty of having a dress code is it made it so that we didn't have to think about it. All I had to do was wear what the dress code stipulated, and I got all of these benefits without having to put any mental energy into it. I didn't have to think about it. I could just come in, I could wear the uniform or adhere to whatever the dress code was, because it was set, it was standardized, it was really easy to navigate. And so I got all of the positives without really having to put too much effort into it, other than making sure that I bought the right stuff and I wore it the right way without looking like an idiot. But we started to move away from dress codes. I don't know if we started to move away from it purely just because we've gotten more casual, or if it's because we decided that there's too much of a hierarchy and we're trying to flatten that, and everybody's equal. Like there's so many different potential reasons why this could be. But really what has happened is we've killed off the idea of dress codes. And here's what sucks is, even though we killed off the idea of dress codes, we have not killed off any of these needs as far as what our clothing is supposed to do for us. Just because your boss doesn't tell you what you're supposed to wear to work on a given day, or your company hasn't created a culture by which you tell your employees they're supposed to dress every day, doesn't mean that their clothing doesn't impact others. It doesn't mean that it doesn't affect their communication or their status or their signals of competence. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on their functionality, and it certainly doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on their mindset. None of those needs go away as we remove dress codes. It's just the ease by which we accomplish those needs, or we fulfill those needs, has gone away, which kind of puts us in a crappy position, because it means that we have to still check all those boxes. We still have to fill all of those needs, but we now have to put in the effort and the energy to figure out what that is and how we make that work. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. I want to see that from you guys. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay. So this is now the topic of the rest of the training, is how do we fill these needs for ourselves? How do we check these boxes when somebody else isn't directly telling us to do? And again, that doesn't mean that there aren't still standards, that there aren't still expectations or dress codes. A lot of you guys work in the tech space. That was probably the most predominant thing that I saw when I asked you guys what industry you worked in. And I guarantee you that if I were to go into one of your offices tomorrow wearing a tuxedo, I would get laughed out of that whole building. It's not completely nebulous and amorphous, and you can wear whatever you want. I would actually have better luck dressing like a woman wearing a dress walking into a tech office than I would wearing a full-fledged tuxedo, right? Because that's within the aesthetic Overton window of what's acceptable within the companies and the company culture and the idea of communication and status and everything that's happening within there. But if I show up in a tuxedo or a three-piece suit or even a sport coat and a pair of jeans in a lot of these places, I'm going to get laughed out of the room, because what I'm signaling is that I don't understand what the communication is. I'm signaling that I don't understand what the culture looks like. And so don't think that this doesn't exist now. It just means that we have to figure out how it works, and you guys have to figure it out on a level that is applicable to you, your industry, your company, your personality. It means you have more work to do instead of less work to do, which is really kind of frustrating. Okay. So this is kind of funny in that one of the most consistent things that I get asked by my guys, or that a lot of guys assume when they think about what they should dress for work and how they should dress in a way that can check all of these boxes, is they start to think that, okay, well, all I need to do is dress up, or I need to dress better, right? And again, the tuxedo takes that to an extreme. We like take that and we turn it up to an 11, but obviously that doesn't work. But even if you really go up any way at all, that doesn't necessarily accomplish what these goals are. And I get why this happens, and don't beat yourself up too much if you've kind of defaulted to this, because that's a 20th century model that existed back then. Within Western culture in the 20th century, if you wanted to signal competence, if you wanted to signal authority, if you wanted to signal credibility or status, or any of these things that most of us would like to be able to signal within our work environments, the way that you did it was by wearing something that was relatively formal. It was clean, it was well pressed, and it attained some level of formality. But that was based on a 20th century culture, and we've moved into a 21st century culture. So formality is not the solution to this problem. At least for 90% of you guys, this is not the solution to the problem, which again brings us to the question of what is the solution to this problem. So I want to go through this option with you guys. This is actually one of the things that I typically only reserve for my guys who go through my coaching program, but I want to share this with you guys tonight because it's such a powerful tool. This is a style dials board. I want you to think about this. You know, when you go to a concert and there's the music engineer that's in the back, and he's got like all the different dials that he's playing with, like the gain and the volume and the bass and the treble and all this other stuff. And it's his job to be back there and to get all of this calibrated so that we as the audience can really just immerse ourselves in and enjoy the music, and the artist can just play. They don't have to do any of this other tuning stuff. That's this guy's job. Okay. You're a one-man band in this regard. You're the guy that's up on stage, and you're the guy who's doing all the calibration on this. But our dials for our style, we have almost as many of these as that guy who's running the soundboard in the back of the concert does. Now, sadly, what most guys do when they start thinking about dressing better is they only play with this dial right here, the formality dial. And so what they do is they work in an office that's probably maybe business casual. So maybe it's like a middle here, or for a lot of us, it's now, especially like post-COVID, it's totally casual, right? And what do they do in order to be able to start to check some of these boxes? They crank that dial all the way up as high as they can, or they crank it up as high as they dare, and they think that's going to solve the problem, which is kind of like, I don't know, maybe this is a dumb comparison because I'm just thinking about this off the top of my head, but I grew up in like the punk rock scene, and all of our guitars were totally distorted. And it doesn't work if you're going to like a country concert, that you have the sound engineer who's like, I'm going to turn up the distortion, because it doesn't work with that particular genre of music. It doesn't communicate what you want to communicate. It doesn't work. And that's the same thing with formality existing in a 20th century culture, trying to transfer it into a 21st century culture. It doesn't translate like that anymore. Okay. So what do a lot of other guys do? A lot of other guys will start to play with pattern. Okay, man, this is one of those, I laugh almost every time. Okay. Tell me this. You can tell me this in the chat. Give me a 1 if you've done this, a 2 if you've never done this. If you thought, I don't want to be boring at work, so I need a shirt that has some pattern or some color to it. I don't want to just wear plain white or plain blue. Put a 1 in there if you've done that, or a 2 if you never have. Okay. Lot of ones. I will tell you that like 80% of men, when you go into any sort of an office environment, whether it's a little bit more dressed up and they're wearing button-up shirts, or it's a little bit more casual and they're wearing t-shirts, you will very rarely see anything that's plain from either a pattern or a color perspective, because everybody wants to stand out by embracing color or pattern. And the irony is, when everybody stands out the same way, nobody actually stands out. We all just wear the same uniform. It just happens to be a patterned one as opposed to a solid one or something else. So most of the time, you don't actually accomplish any of that distinction there. Okay. So most guys are going to play with pattern. Most guys are going to play with color variation. Most guys are going to play with color intensity. And that's not to say that any of these things are wrong. They're not necessarily wrong. But what you don't want to do is just default to the expectation of, this is right because this is the only thing that I know. Therefore, this is the thing that I'm going to start to use. Okay. So what you really need to do is back up a little bit. You need to ask yourself a couple of things. The first thing is, let's talk about impacting others. What is it exactly that I do want to communicate? Do I want to fit in? Or do I do better within my work environment by actually standing out a little bit? Am I better off by actually being a little bit of an outsider, or a little bit of an iconoclast? Is that actually not only help my goals, but help my organization's goals too? What does status look like in my organization? If I'm in a tech space, status and competence and authority are going to look very different than they do if I work in a blue collar industry. And that's going to look very different than it does if I'm a lawyer, which is going to look very different than it does if I'm on Wall Street. And even that can be very different if I'm in, let's say I'm in finance, but I'm in finance in New York City versus being in finance in Kansas City versus being in finance in Seattle. And these things that most of us would universally like to signal get signaled very differently when we're communicating with different groups in different industries. And so think about this from the context of speaking a language. All right. We speak different languages. Obviously, not everybody in the world speaks the same language. And so for me to take a word like communication, if that doesn't mean anything to you because you don't speak English, maybe you can kind of suss it out if you speak another romantic, like a Latin-based language. But if you only speak Chinese, or you only speak Tagalog or something, that idea of communication, it's just garbled nonsense. And so you have to be able to speak the language of the people that you're around. And then you have to know how to speak it in a dialect and in an accent and with the right idioms and the right tonality and everything, so that it works in a way that's appropriate for those people. Now, you guys already do that very intuitively with your language. And it's just as easy and just as important to do that with your clothing. What's difficult about this is you guys spent at least 4 or 5 years, if not longer, at least in elementary school, being taught how to do this from a language perspective. You had your parents correct your grammar. You had teachers that would correct your vocabulary. You had this drilled into you over and over and over again. We took tests on it and everything else. When it comes to our clothes, we were never really taught this. And if we were, it was very indirectly, as opposed to being something that was done very explicitly. And so a lot of us have been left to try and figure this out in a very indirect way, and especially in a way that people don't actually communicate very much. People, it's not like you very frequently are going to go into work and people are going to say, you actually look like kind of an idiot. Sorry, dude. I don't want you on my team, or I'm not going to close on this sale, or I'm not going to work with your organization because you look like a moron. They're going to tell you, oh, it's just not a good fit, or, oh, we went another way, or there's some other way that they're going to soften the blow, as opposed to, I just think you look ridiculous and I don't like you and I don't trust you because of that. And so there's all this nebulousness that's surrounding that. So you have to think about this in a way of, you're really trying to learn a new language. All right. And not only does that work within that regard of communicating to other people, but again, most importantly, what do you want to communicate to yourself? This is most important for you guys who are white collar workers and are having the benefit of working remotely, because you don't have to wear anything you don't want to on a given day. You guys can largely wear whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that there isn't still an internal impact of what you put on. If you just roll out of bed and you stay in your pajamas all day, you're going to work and you're going to function differently than if you roll out of bed and you get dressed. And it doesn't matter what you get dressed in. That's the beauty of you guys that get to work alone or get to work to a large extent very remotely, is you can take all of these things, this credibility, this authority, this I'm now crossing the threshold and I'm going into work mode, and you can attribute that to whatever you want to. I went through this transition myself. I worked in custom suits for 4 years before I went out and worked on my own. And so I was in suits 6, if not 7 days out of the week. And then as I started working on masculine style full time, and I didn't need to be in suits all the time, I really kind of struggled with this idea of what do I do to make sure that I feel like I'm dressed? And it's, for me, it's really even simple, because honestly, like, you guys don't know, I could have just my underwear on right now and you wouldn't know that, but I know. So I still make it a point to get dressed every day. I still make it a point to make sure that I have a watch on, that I've got my wedding ring, this other ring on. I make it a point to like be dressed, not because of what you guys see or what my clients see or what people that I'm doing podcasts with see, but because of what it does for me, and then how it affects my ability to actually be competent in my job. So what's fun for you guys is you get to do that however you want. You could say black t-shirt and jeans. I'm going to put that on when I'm going into work, and I'm going to take it off when I'm coming out of work, so that I mentally have this switch that I turn on and I turn off, so I know when I'm in work mode and I know when I'm in off mode. You can have that kind of power, and you get to arbitrarily assign whatever you want to with that. Now, those of you that don't work remotely will still have some level of that. The more lax the dress code is in the environment in which you work, you're still going to have some limitations in which you can play, but even within that, there's still a lot of freedom to be able to do that in there. And so that's why this is so important, because not only does it hit on that biggest thing, which is your own mindset, but it also gives you the most freedom to be able to assign whatever you want. And so that's what I want you guys to be able to do, is figure out what you want to communicate, how you want to communicate, play within what those rules are within your organizations. And then at the same time, start to attribute or assign, or even just arbitrarily create a dress code for yourself, so that when you put it on to go to work every day, you are entering into work mode. And then when you take it off, when you're done, you are leaving work mode. And watch as your productivity is going to increase, as your overall sense of well-being while you're at work is going to increase, as your focus will increase. And not only that, but when you're off the clock, the fact that you're going to actually feel like you can relax, you can disengage, you can clock out, is going to feel like that increases too, because you have now made a physical change and a physical transformation that tricks your brain, or at least contributes to your brain understanding that I'm not in work mode anymore. I'm now in relaxation mode. I can go on dates. I can spend time with my wife. I can hang out with the boys. I can do stuff with my kids. And I'm not just always on or always off, which is what so many of us deal with from a work perspective, is that we're there, but we're not there, or anything else. And it's just so nebulous in that regard. And so set some boundaries for yourself. And as you do, you're going to find that your mental health, your productivity, your focus, everything else improves in so many ways. Okay, so that's it as far as what I have planned for you guys today. Okay, so a couple of things that I want to go through with you real quick as we open this up for a Q&A, so we can do this the right way. Okay. First thing is, if you know you want some help with this and you want to take a deeper dive on it, you may be a good candidate for my coaching, either one-on-one with me or my group coaching. You may not be a good fit for it at all. If you're interested in that, then what I recommend you do is go fill out an application to do like a 20-minute Zoom call with me. It's just one-on-one with me, and we'll talk about where you are and what you need. If I think I can help you, we'll talk about that. If I don't, I'm going to point you in the direction of somebody else who can. So if you want to dive deep on this with me, go schedule an appointment with me there and we can talk that way. Okay. Now, since we've got another 35-ish minutes to be able to talk and hang out with this, what I want you guys to do is I want you to just type out whatever your questions are. Okay. So go ahead and you can start typing those out now. If it's an easy one that I think I can answer, I'll just answer it as is. If it's one that I'm going to need a little bit more context, which most of the time I'm going to need more context, then what I'll do is I'll have you unmute, and then we can talk about it a little bit back and forth, and we can get more of it from there. A lot of times I may not be able to give you a direct, like, you should wear this and not wear that type of answer, because the amount of context is more than I can get in a few minutes, but I can at least get you pointed in the right direction. So start filling out those questions. Let me know what I can answer for you. And then for you guys who may not have any questions, or your questions may get in a little bit late, don't zone out as I'm answering the questions for these other guys, because a lot of times with this big picture type stuff, you'll learn more from seeing what other guys struggle with or what they excel at than you do with just getting your own questions answered. So start typing those in and let's see what I can do to answer stuff for you. Okay, we'll start with Joseph. What do you think you should say if people comment something like, why are you so dressed up today? This can happen in a work environment where people don't take care of themselves, and I'll be wearing something like a dress shirt and jeans. Okay, so what I would tell you is you probably are actually overdressed. What you should be doing is dressing in a way that's, in fact, Joseph, let's have you unmute. I want to know what everybody else at work is wearing right now.
Yeah, well, currently working from home. I guess
Okay.
probably a lot of people. But whenever I would work at a campus, like people might wear like a t-shirt and sometimes like even like gym shorts or maybe jeans, probably like t-shirt and jeans maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, if I ever wore like a dress shirt, I would get like some reactions from people.
Cool. Okay. So then I would say that a dress shirt is probably too much. And what you should do is still wear like jeans and a tee. You could do like I've got on like a Henley and a tee that has like the placket with the buttons on there. But the way that you feel more professional, the way that you feel more put together, the way that you look more stylish with it is that you make sure that the fit is dialed. You make sure that the colors are simple, and you don't do any logos or anything like that. Another way is that you can improve the quality of what it is that you have on, because most people, if you were to put on like a $5 t-shirt and a $95 t-shirt, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but they would be able to recognize that there's something about that other t-shirt that's nicer. And that doesn't mean that you have to buy $100 t-shirts, but it does mean that whatever kind of is the top range of what you're comfortable spending on clothes, I would recommend spending that. Even with things like shoes, sneakers are a really good way to go. And I would do a simple like white leather sneaker like this, because the fact that it's leather and the fact that it's simple can elevate the professionalism of it or elevate the dignity of it without elevating the formality of it. Does that make sense? Did I lose you?
No, I'm sorry, I went back on
Awesome.
mute. Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say stay within the same realm of formality that everybody else is. Get better at fit, simplify on colors, and then focus on quality. And then you're going to feel a lot better. And people are going to notice that you look better, but it's not going to be, why are you so dressed up today? So that's what I would do there. Okay.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Dressing your age question, roll your jeans up or not. Totally depends on the context, dude. It totally depends on where you are, what you do, who you're with. If it's seen as young and you want to look older, don't do it. If it's seen as young and you want to look a little bit younger, then do it, or vice versa. And so just understand what it's communicating to the people who matter to you, and then play with that communication and use that effectively, just like you would with anything else. This is kind of like going back to the language metaphor. You could take a word that here's one that's retarded. Okay. This is something that a lot of people now kind of cringe at. Oh, you can't say that anymore because the meaning that we've assigned to it has changed, whereas that was in the normal lexicon for everybody else 15, 20 years ago. And so the word in and of itself, the expression of the syllables is not in any way good or bad or moral or immoral or anything. It's the meaning that has been assigned to it. And so understand that from this same question of, it's not good or bad. You shouldn't roll your jeans or not roll your jeans. It just depends on what it communicates to the people that you're around. Okay. Is it okay to dress a little over your competence level if you aspire to get there? Absolutely, Alex, 100%. The best way to think about this is within the progressive overload principle that applies to fitness, where, okay, my one rep max on my deadlift is 405. If I want to get up to 500 pounds, I'm not going to go out on next Wednesday on leg day and throw 500 pounds and try and pick that up, because I'm not going to be able to do it. But what I am going to do is the next time I go for one rep max, I'm going to try and hit 410 And then the next time I'm going to try and hit 415. And so if there's like this huge disparity between the way the guys at your level dress and the way the guys at the next level dress, then I would start to adopt some of those attitudes. Maybe that's improving the quality. Maybe that's upping the formality. That's going to depend on every organization, but start to analyze and really figure out how these guys up here dress versus how these guys down here dress, and then start to emulate those a little bit, but don't just go play full on copycat. Otherwise, there's too much disparity and you're creating too many problems as far as that's where it gets a little try hard or a little bit poserish. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. From Brett, I have really nice Origin Main jeans, but I don't want to wear them in my landscaping maintenance job. Any cheap options for work clothes that get ruined? Shirts besides t-shirts under reflective vests. Okay, so Brett, what I would recommend that you do. This is an opportunity, for, and especially for a lot of blue collar guys. Dress codes or any sort of that, like it's really wide open. You can wear stuff however you want to. Other than if you dress too nice, then you're actually being socially obtuse in that regard. And so you don't want to do that. And so this is where I would look purely at function. If those Origin jeans actually do the job and they breathe better, they feel more comfortable, they're more durable, and they will last longer, like you will get more uses out of those jeans than you do out of a cheaper pair, then I would buy another pair right now and then wear the original pair that you have. So you have a nice pair of jeans and you have a pair that you wear for work. Same thing with t-shirts or anything else. If it doesn't, then you're good to still stick with cheap stuff. But again, focus on the simplicity of things and focus on that personal idea of I'm putting on this particular shirt or this particular color shirt or these jeans or these boots. And that's because I'm in work mode versus when I'm not, and just use that as kind of a mental transition for yourself. Okay. Rich, I'm the rugged archetype. What do you recommend for someone in the IT field to start with clothing selection? So the best way that I would do rugged within the IT field is, well, Rich, let's have you unmute. I assume, and Rich is one of my guys that's in part of my fatherhood group. So we have a little bit of a background here, but Rich, are all the other guys, are they doing button ups or are they doing more like jeans and t-shirts?
I'm more of the typical IT guy, polo, right?
Okay.
Dockers, right? And that atypical IT Best Buy Geek Squad.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get out of that.
Do your shirts have to have a collar?
They do. They have to have a collar.
Okay. So what I would do is I would do jeans instead of khakis or a polo. And then I would do something that is more of like a utility shirt or a work shirt, something that has more of a history of being something that was worn in workshops or in more kind of like blue collar industries. Batchmens.com. They make really, really good utility shirts that from a fit and a quality and everything perspective, because then it still meets the standard of being a collared shirt, but it doesn't look like it's a dress shirt. It would look ridiculous with a tie. So it kind of threads that needle that you're looking at pretty well. So I would start with them and start looking at stuff from there. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, what can we do to improve our overall presence over a video call? Very good question. Okay. These principles still apply and it's the same thing. However, that said, one of the big things is pay attention to what your background is. I'm sure that you guys have noticed, like I've got the mannequin, I've got that lamp on that's back there. I've even gotten to the point where I'm not using my webcam here, but I've got a nice DSLR camera that this is why I'm in focus, but the stuff behind me isn't. You don't have to go to that extreme, but basically think about lighting is huge. I'm going to do, I'll send you guys a photo on this, or maybe I'll do this with a follow-up email. Right in front of me is a giant, is like a big old window. And then, you know, the beauty bloggers that have like the Diva ring lights, that's actually what they're called. Like you can almost see it in the reflection of my eyes. I have one of those too. So I got all my lighting that way. And then I have this little back of a fill light and then this key light that's up here. So lighting helps, background helps. And then even like getting your angles right, because if you're doing like this, that doesn't work. Or if you have people like looking up your nose, that doesn't work either. So a lot of just kind of simple principles like that of interesting, but not overwhelming backgrounds. Please keep it clean. The number of guys that I work with that I will see like laundry on the floor or toothbrush stains on the mirror or anything else like that, like keep it clean, get good lighting, get a decent background, and then wear simple clothes and get your angles right. And that's probably the easiest way to get started with that. Okay, what companies to buy from? I like good styles, but when pants and shirts are 300, yeah. Honestly, Brennan, I don't know. I don't know for you because again, this is going to rely on way too much context because is your style something that needs to be more dressed up? Is it something that needs to be more dressed down? Should you be spending that? Like, is it a budget thing or is it a mindset thing because you actually have the funds? And do we need to work through either one of those? Is cheap going to be better because we're going through stuff really quickly? So what I would recommend that you do, honestly, is schedule one of those calls with me and you and I can talk a little bit deeper about what your context is and see if I can get you pointed in the right direction on some brands to start looking at. Okay. In fact, I'm going to pop that link there one more time for you guys. Okay, let's see. What are your thoughts on adapting office dress style when you work for the same culture in regards to agency but different okay, Richard, let's have you unmute. I want to hear more about this. Give me some more context here.
Hi, so it's actually a situation I'm going through right now. So I'm in the Richmond, Virginia area, but I go to DC a lot with my job, and it's a federal level. But I'll be moving to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where I'll be actually taking a promotion.
Well, that's a whole different world, right?
Yeah. So I'm just trying to figure out how to adapt. Before the DC area, I actually lived in North Dakota too. So I remember experiencing situations where I got that comment where saying, "Oh, you're kind of dressed up nice," and so I just want to kind of transition back in a good way.
Perfect. Okay. Have you had the chance to go out to Cheyenne? Have you had a chance to go out and like see the office, see what the culture is like out in that regard?
Yeah. It's you could say it's pretty cowboy.
Okay. So Cowboys, man, Cowboys hard. This is where these competence things start to come in, because if you go too rugged and too rural, but you're actually not rugged and rural, then it's insulting to you and to them, where it's very obvious that you're like a dime store cowboy and you don't belong here. And that exacerbates things, that makes things worse, right? And so you don't want to go that route, but at the same time, you don't want to be this like condescending outsider, East Coast urbanite, which you may be, you may not be, but from their perspective, you will be regardless. And so you don't want to come across as that way. And so what I would recommend you do is take things down to the lowest level of acceptability with whatever their formality is and stick with it there until you assimilate a little bit more to the area and to the culture, and then start to adopt different points of style that are equally as rugged and equally as rural. So that means like a lot of texture in your clothes. That may mean a lot more denim. That may mean a lot more flannels in the winter. That's boots and stuff like that, without going specifically toward cowboy. So we're not going to do cowboy hats. We're not going to do like pearl snap buttons and cowboy yokes. We're not going to do boots or big belt buckles because that's too tribally specific. Whereas what you're going to want to be is a little bit more just like rugged, rural, neutral. As opposed to leaning all the way into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So I would start with that. And then obviously as you get further, then you can fine tune and go from there. So start there. Let me know how that goes. And same thing with you. If you want to talk a little bit further on that, I may be able to help you out in that regard too.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, man. Okay. It rains a lot in my city and I have to dress quite formally. What should I take in consideration when choosing an umbrella, raincoat, etc., without overdoing it? This one is fairly easy. Keep things simple, where if you have to dress fairly formally, then I would actually go all in on like a good Mac or a good trench coat. You could do, honestly, even like go custom and do something that's more in the vein of like a pea coat or something else, but it's made from a waxed cotton or another rain resistant fabric. And then with an umbrella, yeah, I mean, you can get into gentle dork territory real quick if it's like a really long one with like a polished wooden handle or a fox head or something else. And so I would just say keep it within that realm of still being formal, but not going totally antiquated and old school, because that's where it starts to look like a costume and a little bit less like a uniform. Does that, is it German? Hermann? How do I pronounce your name? And tell me if that helps.
Hermann.
Hermann.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
Does that help?
Much. Yeah, it
Awesome.
helped a lot.
Okay,
Thanks.
good. Let me know how that goes. Yeah, because that's a fun one. Awesome. Okay. All right. Any tips for when your build impacts the formality of your choices? All right, Ben, let's talk about where in your build impacts your choices. I want to hear this.
All right. So the thing that I've been struggling with the most is like, I've got a belly. I'm 6'4", like 280 pounds, been working on losing some weight, but have some health issues that are kind of impacting that.
Okay.
Read a lot about like rule of thirds and like your proportions and stuff. So I typically look better and more balanced in like high-waisted trousers and back the cut. But I have a rugged component to my wardrobe too, and I find it difficult to like find that balance because that kind of pant in particular kind of elevates the formality with like the suspenders and like all of that. So any tips for like balancing that and still keeping that rugged component if certain pieces of clothing kind of automatically elevate formality?
Yes. Okay, that's fun. All right, so then the question we have to juggle here is, what is more important? What's going to give us the most bang for our buck? Is it focusing on the aesthetics and the rule of thirds and what's going to be the most flattering on your body? Or is it going to be what's being communicated as far as this is too formal or too informal? This is going to be too rugged or too refined or too anything else? And if we can get the best of both worlds, that's awesome. One of the ways that immediately comes to mind for me would be something like Wranglers, which are a higher waisted jean, but they're still jeans. And so you could wear them that way without them actually, you know, like you don't have to do the giant belt buckle or anything like that. They don't have to actually look like Wranglers. Levi's, I just bought these myself. They just made a pair of their, I think they're called like the So Tall, that they're a high-waisted jean that may be a good option for you there. But let's just say hypothetically, we can't have our cake and eat it too. We have to choose one or the other. Then what you need to juggle and figure out for yourself is, do the aesthetics more than the communication, or does the communication matter more than the aesthetics? Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so focus on that, find the right answer, and then just go all in on whatever of those is going to be the best one for you. Okay. All right, Ross, what's a good brand of t-shirts for skinnier guys? All right, Uniqlo. They are an Asian-based company that they have quite a few like coastal shops, both East Coast and West Coast here. And they make really good stuff for slimmer guys. American Apparel does good stuff, or brands like Cuts or Son of a Tailor. You'll pay a little bit more, but they also do like different standards, and you can even go fully custom. And so if you're on the skinnier side, those will be good brands for you to look at there. Okay, from Zach, trying to blend rugged and refined a little more because my consulting clients are rural school district teachers, from teacher level all the way up to superintendents. Any staple items I can use that can tie those two looks together? Okay, Zach, let's have you unmute and let's talk through this.
All right. What more do you need to know?
Okay, so tell me, what are they typically wearing? Like, what does their uniform look like?
You know, it's kind of a range. So the teachers usually have t-shirts. That's kind of across the board,
Okay.
Wherever I end up. But the superintendents are polo shirts all the way up to suits to ties. You know, it's just really a range.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's quite a bit. And are you speaking with all of them within a given day, or is it some days you'll be with superintendents and the guys in suits, and other days you'll be with teachers? Like, how much variability do you have as far as who you're dealing with?
it's pretty much different every day.
Okay.
So yeah, like today I met with a special education director who was like polo shirts, jeans, and then tomorrow I'll meet with 4 superintendents at a board meeting.
Okay. And from the rugged perspective, how much of that is that they're wanting it or that you're wanting it? Or is it both?
It's a little bit of both. So
Okay.
I'm from Central Texas, and like I like, you know, hanging out with the good old boys, but you know, at the same time, don't want to overdo it.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Texas question. Are cowboy boots, are they LARPing for you, or are those appropriate for you and within that arena and that tribe as well? How do those fit in?
Yeah, definitely totally appropriate.
Okay, awesome.
Pretty much anywhere you are.
Awesome. Okay, so what I would do for one of those things is make that a default, is wear those.
Okay.
And what's cool about you being in Texas is you can wear those with suits, you can wear those with jeans and a sport coat, you can wear those with jeans and a t-shirt. I would totally play that. That's one of the easiest ways to bring in the rugged. The other thing that I would do is I would skip the idea of polo shirts altogether. So I would either do t-shirts, or I would do kind of like we were talking about with Rich, more of like a utility style work shirt that will still look good if it has a sport coat that's thrown on over it, but it'll also look really good with jeans and boots by itself. I would skip that kind of nebulous gray area polo shirts altogether.
Right on. Thanks, Tim.
Okay. Absolutely, man. Good question. Okay. All right. From Leo, how do I get my 4-year-old kid to try new styles when he only wants to wear his hype beast clothes? Okay, man. This is one that You screwed up by letting them buy it in the fruit. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, maybe a little bit. we don't give our kids those options, and it makes it so that that fight isn't there. But at the same time, I think what's more important for your role as a dad is, rather than saying he can or he can't wear these things, is helping him understand that he should use his appearance as a way to express himself just as much as he uses his words to express himself. And so talk to him about how good he feels when he wears that stuff, and then start to introduce him to ideas of, you will feel just as good if you wear this in this context, or you will feel just as good if you wear that in that context, which also means putting him in different situations where he can wear different things and start to feel differently by wearing those things. That's one of the things that we kind of take for granted, but we go to church every week. And so our kids have to get dressed up every week. And it makes it easier for them to understand that clothing has these different things that are appropriate in this situation or not appropriate in that situation. And I'm sure that he'll get that even when it comes to things like, you wear a swimming suit to the pool, or you don't wear pajamas when we're not going to bed, that type of stuff. And so the more that you can help him understand that clothing is situationally appropriate, then the more he'll start to embrace that as well. And then the other thing is also you just being able to let go and let him wear that stuff, because he's still 4, and it's more important to have him have a good relationship with clothing and to understand it the right way and have a good attachment to you, as opposed to it being something that dad nagged me about, mom nagged me about. I never really got to feel like I got to express myself and have it be a division thing between you. So give him opportunities, teach him correct principles, and then help him kind of expand into that on his own. Leo, shoot me a DM on either social media or an email, and then we can talk about the fatherhood group and see if we're a good fit for you on there. Okay, and then also, how do I feel about Apple Watch outside of the gym? Again, I personally wore one for about 3 years, and then I got rid of it because I didn't like the aesthetic of it. I'm in like 90% of my neighbors are men that all work in the tech space. So 90% of them all drive Teslas and wear Apple Watches too. So from a context standpoint, it's totally appropriate there. So that's going to be a tribe question more than anything else. One thing that I will say is, play around with different straps. You can get canvas, you can get leather, you can get other stuff like that gives you a little bit more flexibility than just always the generic leather strap. So that'll be helpful too. Okay. I'm a marketing director in the architecture industry, currently leading our office's brand refresh. We really need to take new staff photography that looks current, but not everyone cares really how they dress look. How would you go about communicating in a nice but effective way with the rest of the team? Okay. Chris, pull that or unmute for me. What kind of resistance, have you gotten any resistance yet? Or is this just kind of like anticipating potential resistance?
It's more anticipating, because I get comments like, I work from home. We have been working from home for, this whole time. But when I would dress up just slightly, I get the comments like, why are you dressed like that? Or do you have a big meeting today with somebody? And a lot of this stuff just is very like, I don't know, it just seems like dated to how we want to present ourselves as a firm. Okay. But you also don't want to be like mean to people. And, right. So I just want to like try to communicate nicely, but people don't show up with like, a dated look. Or
do they care about the designs of the buildings they design? Like, do they care about the aesthetics of that?
Yeah, very much so.
Right? Isn't it funny that we can be so domain dependent, where it's like, you guys, you clearly get the value of aesthetics. You put this is what you do.
Yeah.
But you can't do it with your clothes, right?
Yeah.
And so I obviously wouldn't be like that disdainful and incredulous with it, but I would help them understand that like, hey, we're doing these new photos. And just like you wouldn't be super stoked to show like a 1990s split entry home as the top thing in your portfolio for a design, you probably want to consider what your clothing communicates and how well that reflects your overall aesthetics, the aesthetics of the firm, and the fact that we understand the value of beauty and lines and the golden ratio and all of this beyond just the buildings that we design as well, is probably how I would phrase something like that.
Yeah. Would you give like a few tips, like wear simple colors?
Sure.
Like don't go with crazy patterns.
Yep.
Like,
okay. Don't go crazy on color or pattern. Don't think that you have to dress formally. Just find things that fit well, and they keep it simple, because the focus should be on you, not on the clothes. Simple stuff like that. Yeah.
Cool.
Dude,
thanks.
Let me know how that goes. That's a fun one.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I like it. Absolutely, man. Okay. All right, what brands for shirts would you recommend for more muscular guys? I'm biased on this one. My friend Greg O'Gallagher, who runs Kino Body, I helped him design these Henleys and the t-shirts and stuff that he's making, and that was very specifically for guys who have bigger arms and shoulders than I do. And so those are really good. American Apparel, surprisingly, even though, here's one of the things that you guys need to understand, especially you more muscular guys, but really you guys are all in here because you care about masculinity. Otherwise, I would have pissed you off at some point long ago and you wouldn't be on here. One of the biggest tricks to getting good at finding the right clothes is ignore the shoots that companies do with their models, because they will always pick the most like effete, dainty models and then put them in the worst poses, and it's going to turn your average like red-blooded American male off from what those clothes are. And what sucks is that a lot of times those clothes look really, really good on normal guys, and especially on well-built guys. So my business partner for Chess Magazine, Jack Donovan, really good example of that. Jack, shredded, totally looks like like a built dude should look. And his favorite t-shirt brand is American Apparel. And they're like the epitome of the effete, wimpy hipster look. And it's just because of what they choose to do from a branding and a modeling and a photo shoot perspective. And so a lot of times you have to get over the way that these brands present themselves and still be willing to try stuff out, because a lot of it will actually work on you better than you think. So, okay, guys, we're going to call it there. My son has a football game that hopefully he's going to throw his first touchdown. So I'm going to go watch him and cheer him on. One more time, if you guys want to talk a little bit deeper with me on this, I would love to connect with you and see if you're a good fit for any of my coaching programs. So you can schedule a call with me there. Thank you guys for coming on. As always, really good questions. Do me a favor also and let me know. I want to do these once a month. I want to do these like the first Thursday of every month and get into a groove on this. And so if you have something in particular you would like to see a training on, shoot me an email. It's just tanner@masculine-style.com. Let me know what you would like me to go over with you, and we can I can continue to hopefully offer a lot of value. So thank you guys. Loved hanging out with you tonight. I'll see you guys online and have a great evening. Bye guys.